direction, this arrangement can be either be periodic throughout the complete space, or it can be random, or it can be periodically. It can be periodic for a particular part of the structure as well. So these arrangements depends on so many factors, and the major factor that is going to create this what you call it as periodic arrangement, or if there are any defects, whatever it is, it will be dependent on how we are preparing the solid. Okay, so as far as silicon is concerned, the next chapter will be how exactly we purify the silicon. So at that time you will understand what methods are there and how exactly it creates a problem. So these methods, depending upon what you call it as the state of art, the defects may or may not be present, and the extent would be controlled by that. And then obviously the intermolecular forces, depending upon what exactly you are preparing. Okay, so if there is alloy, the things would be different. So as far as whatever the metal or whatever the element is concerned, the arrangement of these atoms in space is known as the crystal lattice or lattice structure. So when it is a single crystal lattice, definitely we have the so we have only one type of atom arrangement throughout the entire volume. It means that there is no single defect. Okay, there is no absence, there is no foreign atom over there over in the arrangement. Now, so this is what the ideal arrangement would be. So we can view this arrangement from various positions in the crystal structure. And for that, we have to define what is the lowest or smallest, what you call it as representation of that. And this particular representation would be kind of repetitive. So we can call it as lattice point. So that represents a particular atomic array by a single dot. So this distance between the two atoms which are aligned in a fashion, any two atoms now, because everywhere it's the same, you look at any direction. So this depends on the type of bonding that particular material has, the bond strength, and then the size of the atom nucleus, as I've said in the alloys. So here there are three basic bonds: ionic bond, where the charges are moving from one to another species. Second thing is the covalent, where basically the atoms are shared, and these two depends on obviously what is the valency of these elements we are talking about. And then we have got van der Waals forces, especially these will be in liquids like the acids. Okay, HF acid, fluorine can be, fluorine is a highly reactive, so it quickly forms the bond. But anyway, you can take it down with a smaller amount of what you say energy in opposite direction. So these bonding, but obviously we only want the covalent bond. We will talk about covalent bond in silicon maybe in next chapter. So coming back to the arrangement, as I've said already, a single dot is the lattice point, and then we have what thousands of millions or infinite, we can say virtually, these lattice points arranged in this. So this again, I'm showing you the schematic. This is not how exactly they are arranged. Actually, they will be touching each other, but for the sake of what you say, showing you in a better manner, I have had some distance between any two atoms over here. So we can think that this particular a single lattice point will have some volume, and this will represent the entire crystal volume for that. So this particular volume is going to repeat in 3D when we are talking about the 3D. If we are talking about 2D, there will be only the atoms. So this you can go on arranging, and if you repeat this particular structure, then you are going to get a larger 3D structure. So quintessentially, this is what you call it unit cell, that is the smallest volume which can represent the entire arrangement. So it would, that's why it is called as the unit cell. So you can see in the GIF that we are repeating the atoms and then we get the 3D structure. So obviously, if everything is defined, we can define the position of each and every atom. So suppose we have got one unit cell in the array, then we can choose one reference point, let us say O, and then to any two other lattice arrays, we can put it by some vector, and these positions of any atom can be given by the vector P or position vector depending upon what is the length. Of course, now the length m and n depends on what will be the it depends on the material. Okay, so how far these two atoms are. So not necessarily that it should be equal. So it depends on, and rather this will define what are the different structures that we have. We will come down to that later. So the point is that the position vectors can be defined with a rectangular coordination systems. So as I was saying that there could be different types of unit cells. So there are different shapes and different sizes. So the simplest possible we have already seen that in 3D it is the crystal lattice in a cubic shape where M and N would be L, M and all the three would be equal. But then there are other unit cells as well. So it depends on what are the three distances A, B, C if we are talking about, and then it also depends on what is the angle, corresponding angle it is made. So we can call it as alpha, beta, gamma. And based on these four major ones are the apart from of course cubic, the rhomboidal, hexagonal, monoclinic, and triclinic. Of course, if we want the entire family of these is then, or we call it as primitive cells. So there are about 7, and you can see the conditions where we are how these are differentiated. So cubic, as expected, A, B, C would be equal, alpha, beta, gamma would be equal. And then we have got three different arrangements: base centered, body centered, and face centered. That's what we are going to look now. So anyway, these are the different the crystals, three-dimensional crystals that we can have. Now the types of cubic cell I was talking about. The first one is the simple cubic, abbreviated as SC. So as there is only one atom per unit cell now, because again you have to understand that there are 8 balls which we are keeping it together, touching each other. So of course there is whatever this length what I'm showing, it is just for representational purpose. So they are actually touching each other. So obviously one atom is shared by the aligned cells as well. So we have to find out the share. So obviously these 8 sides are there, and every corner has got one atom. So 1 by 8 into 8. So ultimately it becomes 1 atom per unit cell. And then next is the body-centered cubic. The names are very intuitive. So you can say that it is basically a cubic cell, simple cubic cell, but as it is a body-centered as well, obviously we have one more atom centered at the body. And then obviously this is the additional atom. We get 2 atoms per cell. We have got face centered. So there are 6 faces, and then the 6 face will have one atom which will be shared by the aligned cell. So this is 1. Then we have got 3 pairs for 6 faces. So obviously this will become 3, and then we have got 1 plus 3 as 4 atoms per unit cell. Then whatever this length A, we can define it as lattice constant, and this is the length of the side of the cubic cell. So obviously for a particular material, this lattice constant will be obviously constant. And most of the semiconductors, not only silicon, other ones like germanium or the alloys, even gallium arsenide, cadmium telluride, whatever which we are using for, especially for solar cell applications, have cubic unit cells. We will talk about silicon cell at the end of these particular slides. So this lattice constant, as I've said, it is constant. So for silicon, it is 5.43 angstroms. So angstrom is 10⁻⁻10 atoms. Last time we talked about the nanotechnology. So that is roughly around, if you talk about the Bohr radius of silicon, it comes out to be around 5 nanometers. So if you talk about the atoms, it would be roughly around 100. Okay, roughly around 100. So that is what we are playing with when we are talking about nanomaterials, and that too I'm talking about 5 nanometers. If you talk about 1 or 2 nanometer small silicon quantum dot, which we assume it has to be in 3D, so you can find out there are 30-40 atoms. That is what roughly we are talking about. Anyway, so let us do some calculations over here. I hope you have got your pen and calculator. So here, for a single crystal material, there is a body-centered cubic, and the lattice constant is given as 5 angstrom. Find the volume density of the atoms. So obviously, volume density is the number of atoms per unit cell divided by A. So this number of atoms for what you call it as body centered, we already know that it is 2, and as far as this lattice constant is concerned, it is given by 5 angstrom, and we have done some conversion. And then as it is a volume, we have to volume will be AQ. So what we get is 1.6 into 10 raised to 22 atoms per centimeter cube. So you can think that this is the number of atoms that what we are talking about, and this is defined as the volume density. Now next thing is the atomic packing fraction or the packing density. Now what happens is whenever you take the atom, of course it is not going to completely fulfill the volume. So here packing fraction is the ratio of volume of atoms which are occupying in the unit cell to the volume of unit cells. Okay. So obviously there are certain voids present over here. This packing fraction, interestingly, we are also going to learn when we will talk about the solar modules. Okay. So anyway, so for simple cubic cell, A will be equal to 2R, and R is the radius of every atom that we can think of. So if we are talking about simple cubic cell, then A is equal to 2R. So your volume of the cell will be 8R cube, whereas a single atom, that is what is contributed to simple cubic cell, so it becomes 4 by 3 pi r cube, and your atomic fraction comes out to be 52%. So can you please calculate the APF for the other two arrangements what we saw, BCC and FCC? Please calculate it and let me know the value. Nikhil Dhoke. Nikhil.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, tell me the answers.
So for BCC, 74%.
You are guessing, you don't have calculator?
Wait,
Huh?
1 minute, sir. 1 minute, sir.
What, are you going to purchase it or order it online?
No, sir. Actually,
What?
I was trying to remind the thing that I learned in class 12, 68%.
No, I'm talking about calculator now. What happened to the calculator?
Sir, I have now.
You have, okay. Fine. What is the APF for BCC?
For BCC, 68%.
68%.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and for FCC? Yeah, anybody else for FCC? What is the value?
74%.
Yeah, 74%. Yes, obviously, it is expected, right? But you can see that even if we are moving from 1 atom per cell to 4 atom per cell, still the packing fraction is just 74%. Okay, so so this is how this packing fraction controls the density and everything. Now, next thing is we are always talking about the arrangements. So how to define these arrangements? And for that, we have to understand planes and directions in the crystal. So direction, so now you can imagine yourself in a matrix or something, and then you are looking at virtually anywhere. Okay, so wherever you are looking, we can call it as direction, but we are looking into the crystal. So everywhere there are what you call it as atoms. Okay, and then whatever the plane which is perpendicular to your direction of view, obviously it is called as plane. And this particular is very important when we want to know this direction and planes, because see, ultimately with this silicon we make wafers, and these wafers are processed to make solar cells. Okay, so this involves the fabrication technique involves many of the chemical treatment, many chemical treatment. So obviously, depending upon this direction, the chemical treatment will differ. Okay. Then next is how we are arranging the different layers. Okay. So and when the photon interacts with solar cell, obviously that's the optical impact what we are talking about, and this optical impact can hurt the efficiency of the solar cell. So optically, it is important in which direction you are making the solar cell. Now, as far as strength is concerned, it has nothing to do with solar cell, but yeah, it can be related. Later, I will tell you how we can break the wafers. At that time, I will actually show a demonstration now how direction is also important as far as strength is concerned. Okay, if I have to give a quick example, it is the glass. If you have observed at hardware store, the glass is always kept vertical. It is never kept horizontal to the ground. Why? Because if it is vertical, the force is channeled to a very what it is, a small thickness. So definitely glass is not going to break even if it fails along that edge. But if it fails horizontally, definitely it is going to break. So it is just one of the example of how direction is related with the strength. So anyway, let us talk about these planes and direction more. So we have got x, y, z as the space coordinates. So xy is the horizontal plane I'm talking about, and z is the vertical one. So if we are talking about a cubic space here, so we can place this with one atom at the origin, and we can put all these 8 atoms on the sides. So we can number them from C1 to C8. Now you can find out that we are defining one plane C1 with the atoms C1, C2, C3, and C4, which is what you say cutting x-axis, whereas it is parallel to the ZY axis or the ZY plane. So C1, C2, C3, C4 is a plane. So this particular plane, let us say we are having this A as unity. So this plane is referred as 1, 0, 0. So when we are talking about x, y, z, it is cutting x at 1, whereas it is not at all cutting to z and y. So we can call this particular plane as 1, 0, 0 plane. And when we have to denote this as a plane, we use the simple brackets, curly brackets to write 1, 0, 0. So the direction for this particular plane will be perpendicular. So obviously it will be in parallel with the x-axis line. So this direction can be written by with using a square bracket. So that is the difference between plane and direction when we are going to represent it or when we are going to write it. But of course we have got some other planes as well. So for example 0, 0, 1, that will be parallel to xy plane, and the direction will be parallel to z. So that is 0, 0, 1. Next we have got 0, 1, 0, which is parallel to xz, and the direction is parallel to y. So such a planes you can always define. Now of course these were the simple planes, but then we can have any plane virtually. So some other typical planes what we can encounter when we are talking about these silicon structures could be 1, 1, 0. So you can see that at that 0 indicates it is not at all cutting with the z axis. So obviously that plane should be somewhere parallel to z direction or z axis, and it should be cutting x and y at 1, 1. So it should be one oblique plane. Then next we can have a plane which is cutting all 3 axes. If you find out the direction, it will be going through the what to say center of the coordination system or our reference point, and this plane now can be called as 1, 1, 1. Okay, so now this is the plane which I am defining in this unit cell. So suppose I have got 2, 3 more cells which are besides this and which are aligned to this. If you translate this, the plane will remain the same. Okay. So the complex scenario can occur when the unit cell will not be a cubic one, and when we have got more atoms in this, maybe the rhombic cell or something like that. And obviously, in such cases, the sides will not have dimensions equal. It will have dimensions of A, B, C. All three might be equal. So in that case, how we are going to define these planes and direction? And for that, we have got certain rules. So let us say we have got this ABC, A in X direction, B in Y direction, and C in Z direction. Of course, that is now constant in that particular direction. And let us try to say that this is what the plane we have, and we have to find out how to define this plane and how to find out the direction for this particular plane. So you can see this plane is cutting X in 4 units of A, B in 5, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 units, and then Z in 2 units. So for such a complex situations, the planes and directions are given by the Miller indices. These indices are denoted by HKL. So let us try to find out how to what is the procedure for this. So you can work with me. So first of all, you have to find out the intercepts of the plane along the 3 axes. So which will be defining ABC. Then you have to take the reciprocal of these intercept values. So already I think we have defined some 4, 2, 5 or something like that. So we have to take the inverses. And then these 3 integers we have to, these 3 rationals we have to find out. From this we have to find out the smallest set of integers by multiplying with some constants. So we can do the rationalization over there, and this is the number what we are looking for to define the plane, obviously in brackets HKL and HKL. So let us try to do for this particular example. I think the plane is changed. Earlier it was 2 in Z direction, now it is 1 anyway. So the intercepts are 3, 2, 1, right? So in x-axis 3, y-axis 2, and in z-axis 1. So obviously when we take the reciprocals, it will become 1 by 3, 1 by 2, 1 by 1. Lowest common denominator would be 6. When we multiply this with the reciprocals, what we get is 2, 3, 6. So the plane in the right hand side, what we have defined is 2, 3, 6. And these numbers, these integers, what we are going to, which is defining the plane, is called as the Miller indices. Okay, so this is how you can virtually find out any planes. Obviously, we don't have to do it because in silicon or in typical metals, typical elements, we will have certain standard Miller indices. Okay. Next is we have already calculated volume density. We can also find out the surface density. So already we have defined the plane. Let us say we are talking about a 110 plane. So this is a 110 plane which is cutting X and Y, and let us say it's a cubic structure. So lattice constant is A. And let us assume this the value of A to be 5 angstroms. Then surface density is defined as volume density. We have already defined number of atoms divided by volume. So obviously surface density will be number of atoms on the given surface area. And in here, the surface area what we are talking about is the plane, 110 plane. So in this case, there will be 2 2 atoms in that plane, because one center atom will be there and the 4 atoms are contributing to the plane. So it becomes 2. And as far as that area is concerned, it will be A into root 2 A, because we are talking about the length in the top square. So this is where we get the surface density. And as I've said, the surface density of these atoms will be obviously function of the crystal planes in the lattice, and it obviously will be varying.
Sir, shouldn't it be 1.5 atoms?
Which one?
1.5 by A into root 2A.
One is contributed by the corners, and the central atom is completely on the plane.
Corners
Okay.
would be 1/8 into 4, right?
Other four are not at all contributing to the plane. I'm not talking about the cell. I'm talking about the plane. So there are only four.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if it is a cell, it is 1/8. But now it is plane, so only four atoms are under consideration. Okay. Anyway, so the surface density will matter whenever we are again going to teach chemically. Okay, so now sir, these are the basic things which are applicable for any kind of element. Now let us turn towards more specific and specifically to the silicon. So what are the different properties of silicon? To give a general view, this is the eighth most common element in the universe by mass. And as far as Earth is concerned, it is widely distributed as dust and sand in the form of maybe silicon dioxide, or it may be silica. Silica is a impure form. Okay, so anyway, but dust and sand is not what, easily we cannot convert silicon. So obviously we don't use this sand as a raw material to make the silicon. So that's why silicon, although it is very much abundant, still it is not that cheap. Okay. And as far as the purification process, which we will learn in the next class, next lecture, is not that easy as it sounds. Anyway, so as far as Earth crust is concerned, about 90% is composed with the silicate materials, making silicon the second most abundant in the Earth crust when we are talking about. So that is 28% after the oxygen, because everything gets oxide, right? So another advantage as far as silicon as semiconductor is concerned, it has got negative temperature coefficient of the for the resistance. So these are the simple important properties we can have for the silicon, and then we have got some chemical and other physical properties. So as far as important properties, what you should remember is the atomic number, that is 14. So whose mic is on? Can you please switch it off? Okay, so atomic number is 14. So as expected, the atomic weight is roughly double, that is 28.085. You can take it as 28. It has got 4 electrons in the valency, so the electronic configuration will become 284. Solid phase we are talking about, that is what the natural existence. This density will be important for you. So remember this particular number very well. It is 2.32 gram per centimeter cube. As far as melting and boiling points are concerned, just to give the idea, roughly around 1600 to and 3500 Kelvin. So when we will be talking about the refining process of silicon, you will try to appreciate these particular numbers. Crystal structure is face-centered diamond cubic. We'll talk about that exclusively in few slides. Okay, so let us talk about this unit cell of silicon. For germanium and diamond, the unit cell is very similar with the silicon, and it can be derived by 2 FCC unit cells. Already we have discussed about FCC unit cells. So if we have to talk about this in terms of formula, this is what we can find out. So you can see here FCC XYZ. So that is what one first unit cell we will have. And if we shift this XYZ by 1/4 in that relevant direction, then we will have the second cell. So this is and then if we try to have a volume unit cell, then it is going to define the unit cell of this, and this is what I'm talking about. So one FCC we already have, and then we are having 4 atoms. Now when we are shifting it, we are going to have the intermediate atoms. Of course, this particular diagram what I'm showing is can be complex, so we can rotate it and we can see. So now you can see, as far as these black atoms are concerned, one this on the corners and the centers. Of course, this is defined by the FCC, but then we get the 1/4 atoms from when we are shifting one unit cell over here. So these are the 4 atoms which we get extra. So this particular arrangement you will see when we are looking from the top. So obviously when we are looking from, let us say, this direction or from this direction, the arrangement what you are going to look as is a different one. Of course, this is the unit cell that is going to repeat itself so that you can get the complete silicon material. Okay, so if I had to show this, in GIF, this is what the arrangement would be. So you can see that right side GIF, that is what we are rotating. So when you are looking from one side, the atomic arrangement is different. When you are looking from the corner, you can see that it is kind of a hexagonal diamond hexagonal structures. This slide already I have talked about. The silicon, of course, it is quite an important element, and it is used to prepare the large material is used for aluminum alloys and silicon and silane. These are the gases, by the way. And the semiconductor industry, as silicon is the major player, but you will find out only 3% of the whole silicon what we produce is used in the semiconductor industry. And then we have got solar industry. Of course, it is a kind of semiconductor industry itself, but in one of the lecture I said there are 2 different silicons. For solar, we can use solar grade silicon. Semiconductor industry used electronic grade silicon. So that's the difference. And as far as these aluminum alloys or silanes are concerned, they use the metallurgical grade silicon. Okay, so we'll talk about that when we talk about the purification. So this is how the silicon is roughly used. And as far as the structure is concerned, I told you that we need repeated arrangement, and it depends on how large this repetition is carried. So crystalline silicon, we have infinite unit cells with the same arrangement. When it becomes very short, for a very short structure, this is repetitive, it becomes amorphous. And in between these two, extremes, we have got polycrystalline. So here literally we cannot, in amorphous, we cannot define even a small area where the arrangement is repetitive. In crystalline, everywhere it is repetitive. So in polycrystalline, you can see that these lines, by the way, are the atoms. Like I think I have shown you in the silicon quantum dot. Okay, but this arrangement is limited to a small polygon. So that's why it is called as a polycrystalline solar cells. So normally you will find out electronic grade material will be absolutely crystalline. Amorphous is for the thin film solar cells. Okay, and this polycrystalline is somewhat in between, and we are compromising with the arrangements. So most of the solar cells currently are made up of this crystalline, but people are moving towards polycrystalline, and it has polycrystalline is also called as multi are synonymous. So by 2005, when we understood that this crystalline silicon is costlier, and that's why it is increasing the cost of the silicon. That's why we are moving towards the polycrystalline cell. And this you can easily identify which material is used in the cell which you are looking at. So these are the 3 examples of silicon cells, and I'm very sure this one you have seen. This one you have seen. Can somebody tell me where you have seen this kind of solar cell? The third one. Have you seen a brownish orange color solar cell? Yes.
Is it on a calculator?
Yes, this is on your calculator. Okay, so a small orangish one, it is the solar cell which is enough for powering your calculator, but these 2 are used for the commercial purposes. So this one is monocrystalline. What 4 lines what you are seeing on this, I mean this one and these small lines, vertical lines, they are called as fingers and bus bars. Okay, so that is not the part of the material, that is for collecting the current. Okay, we will talk about that later. Same arrangement we are using in here as well in polycrystalline, but this arrangement is absent in the thin film solar cells. Okay. So, but I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about, you can see these grains. So this is called as grain, and you can see small patches, patch-like structure, which is what you can say, it is identifiable. So this is a single grain. Okay, and that's why such a cells, if you see, we are going to understand that this is made up of a polycrystalline material. So this is poly, and this is a monocrystalline material that we have. The blue color, it is coming because of certain material. We'll talk about that later. But remember this blue color. Blue is not because of silicon. Rather, brownish or orangish color is because of the silicon. Silicon is not at all blue. So obviously, by visual, we can just visual inspection can tell us that these are the three different types of silicon we are using. And when we make panel out of it, you can also see that these patchy structures, that is what the polycrystalline. Monosilicon will be uniform, thin film will be also uniform, but however the color will be different over here. Okay, so color here is brownish, color here this looks black, but no, it is dark blue. This is also blue color. Now, um, I talked about that there is an arrangement, and whenever the arrangement is broken, we call it as a defect. And there are four types of defect which we can classify: point, dimensionless, then line defect, 1D, 2D, that is area, and third one is the volume defect. So there are point defect can be vacancy. It means one atom is absent. Okay. Then straight line dislocation. So line is shifted. So I'll talk about this in the coming slides, so that you can understand that what are the defects. So these defects are straightforward related to the method by which we are making this silicon or making this particular element. So these are again the general defects, not only to silicon, it can happen for any material. So these are called as imperfections in solids, and the first imperfection would be the lattice vibration itself. So every atom, because as it is having some temperature, it will acquire some thermal energy, and this is obviously as a function of temperature, surrounding temperature, and that's why this thermal energy is causing to for lattice vibration to vibrate this atom at its place. So that's why this energy will be always what you call it as a loss kind of thing. So these are the lattice vibrations, and then the other defects are point defect. It is the vacancy. So you can understand that this is a vacancy. So there is no atom present, no silicon or whatever is atom is present. Whereas interstitial is atom is forced in between the arrangement, and that's why the arrangement which is what is nearby, it gets disturbed. So interstitial means in between. So these are the point defects. Then there are line perfections. So you can see that till this point everything was absolutely aligned, but somehow because of what to say, deposition defects or something, now that line is broken and this particular line is now absent, and accordingly the alignment is made. Next is what we call it as impurities. These are also imperfections. So sometimes we can have foreign atoms. So we are talking about silicon, but somehow there will be, let us say, a copper atom which is sitting somewhere in between. So instead of that interstitial defect can be something like copper or any other atom. So these substitutional impurities where silicon is replaced by some other copper atoms, and the interstitial copper will sit in between among the normal sites where the silicon is sitting. So when we are replacing silicon, it is substitutional, and when it is sitting in between, it is called as the interstitial impurities. So we can have many impurities over here. So it may be oxygen, which is normally inert. It can be gold, phosphorus. So we will try to list down these possible impurities over here in this. So for example, but all impurities are not bad. So something like the bacteria, all bacteria are not bad. Some will make curd for us, but whereas some will cause the infections. So the first impurity could be useful impurity, and that we use for dopants. We talk about the dopant when we talk about the extrinsic semiconductors. So p-type dopants are boron, aluminum. N-type dopants typically used are phosphorus is majorly used. So these impurities are good impurities. These are going to help us. Then we have got benign, like as I said, oxygen. It is not going to do anything. Okay, it will just sit there and it will not harm any function as such. And then next one is the potentially dangerous impurities. It depends on where it sits. That's why it is called as the potentially dangerous impurities. The point is these doesn't remains at a place, and that's why it goes on diffusing. However, the advantage is that these are very rare materials. So obviously you will have the density of these imperfections, impurities will be too low. So hafnium, lanthanum, zirconium, and all that. But then we have got some very dangerous impurities. These are called as deep impurity levels. Deep it is called because when we will talk about the band diagram, you will understand that these metals sit at such a place that it is going to mess up with the conduction process in the semiconductors. So these deep impurities are normally the metals, iron, copper, nickel, chromium, manganese, gold, silver, whatever you talk of. So typically metals are bad for us. For example, sodium. Okay, so sodium is absolutely horrible. So that's why whenever we handle silicon wafer, we always have the gloves. Why? So from what is the relation of hand, gloves, and what you call it as wafer? Any guess? Hand, our hand, where we are handling the silicon wafer. Okay, what is the relation? From where the sodium is going to come? Yep. Yes.
Sir, if we use our bare hands, then there is a chance we might transfer some impurities to the wafer.
But from where that impurity is coming, that's what I'm saying. Which impurity here we are talking about?
Sir, maybe sodium would
Yes,
can
sodium.
it be
Because of
from salt?
yes, it is
Salt.
salt. From where the salt will come?
Sweat.
Sweat. Yes. So our hands will be sweating, right? So that's why we have to use gloves. So just a simple example. So the point is this diffusion is too high for such atoms, and that's why immediately they will reach to the surface of the silicon and they will start going inside. Okay, so that's why this kind of impurities are absolutely bad. So what we have learned so far in this, so the lecture is over by the way, and the topic as well. So what we have learned here is the key takeaway points are, first of all, whatever we are going to purify, it depends on the purification process, or if we are going to deposit it, it depends on the deposition process, where these imperfections or impurities are going to come. And then we have to avoid certain kinds of impurities such that it can damage or it can deteriorate the performance of the device, whatever device we are talking about, may it be a processor or may it be a silicon solar cells. Okay, so these purification methods and how we avoid or which impurities we avoid, that is what we are going to talk about in our next topic, that will be the purification of the silicon, and how exactly we start from a raw silicon ore and we end up having the silicon wafers. Okay, wafers which are usable to us. So as the topic is ending, I'll stop here. Any quick questions? I think somebody asked me question about purification and impurities in the first lecture. So still hang on. I'll try to answer it in the next lecture, which is dedicated for these impurities and purifications. So any quick questions? No? Okay. Thank you. So thank you. Good night. Bye bye. I'm ending this meeting.